Audio Jungle.
Jiang Cheng turned to meet the old man's eyes and then turned back away. "Get the camera," he told the other man. "Let's leave." Just as they were about to leave, "Wait." Hearing that, everyone paused and turned back. The elder shuffled over with difficulty. He held a black bag in his hand. "Since your camera is broken, you can use this for now." Before the man from room 406 could react, the elder shoved the black bag into his hands. The man had no idea what the elder meant, and he subconsciously wanted to push the bag back. However, the elder didn't give him the choice. He turned and returned back to the yard. Then, the gate closed with a creak. Inside the bag was a black camera. The model was old, and some of the corners had been ground off to reveal the metal underneath. However, it was still usable. Fatty looked at the camera and grumbled worriedly, "What is this? A reward we got for triggering some side quest?" "No." Jiang Cheng stared at the closed gate and shook his head. "This is not a side quest. After all, the mission had explained at the start that the stuff they needed had been sent to the prop room. Therefore, they had to come here eventually. Perhaps the cameras were meant to be broken. In other words, everything that happened since they arrived at the building had been preordained. Like the woman at the start, the elder was also an NPC. His purpose was to deliver this camera to the players." Hearing Jiang Cheng's analysis, the man who held the camera was very scared. His body trembled, and he looked like he was about to drop the camera, like there was a ghost hiding inside it. No one came to console him. Consolation was the cheapest thing, besides kindness, in the nightmare realm. It did nothing but to expose your stupidity. At this place, stupidity was the original sin. Jiang Cheng walked over and took the camera. He examined it and placed it in the black bag. Then, he slung the bag around the man's neck. He patted his shoulder. "Don't be scared. Focus on the positive. I think you'll be fine." The man remained startled for a full second. This was the first time he had felt warmth from another human since he had arrived in this strange dream world, and he saw sincerity in the eyes of this man. "Thank you," the man said with shaking lips. Just as the man was about to say something else, Jiang Cheng shrugged. "No need to thank me. I just think you can survive. Whether you will or not in the end is up to you. After all, I thought 2 people could survive in my last mission, but one of them had their head pried off, and the other didn't even have their head left. Everyone, all right." Fatty was worried that Jiang Cheng might be antagonized, so he quickly changed the subject. "Now that we have the camera, what should we do next?" The woman with the ponytail thought about it and said, "We should take a few pictures of random people in the school and see if there's any problem with this camera." This was undeniably a clever move. After all, no one knew if using the camera would trigger the ghost. It was best to test it on the students. Coincidentally, a few female students walked out of the prop building. They were dressed quite fashionably. The man took out the camera, knelt on the ground, and wanted to take their picture. "Is this really a good idea?" a voice came from behind them. It was weak and gentle. Everyone turned. It was the girl in the pajamas. She lowered her chin like she knew her suggestion wouldn't be accepted. However, she gathered her courage and continued, "After all, they are innocent. We are the outsiders." Her voice dwindled. Just as Fatty was about to praise this girl for her good acting, the man in the tank top jumped out. Fatty believed his name was Zhou Dafu. He started to scold the girl greatly. He kept repeating things like if she wanted to die, she didn't have to drag everyone down with her. It was clear that the man with the camera was annoyed as well. However, his attention was more on the woman with the ponytail. Clearly, she was the one who gave the final say. However, the woman was not in a hurry to speak. Her eyes scanned the girl in the pajamas. The judgment in her eyes flashed, but Jiang Cheng captured everything. The confusion in his heart also lessened. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice of the suited man came. He was as suave as ever. Now is not the time for argument. He walked out of a small path in the forest. The man with the cap followed him with a dark face. Jiang Cheng saw where the man came from. The forest was rather robust. The path was hidden in the forest. We said we'd gather at noon. Fatty was the first to say, "Where have you been?" The man with the cap scoffed and was about to retort when he was interrupted by the suited man. "Thank you for the concern. We encountered some things we rushed over once we solved those. I hope the original plan hasn't been interrupted." "Thankfully, no," Jiang Cheng replied. "Since you weren't here on time, we thought." He paused before adding shyly, "You have to understand that this is the dream realm, Mr. Guardian Angel. Anything can happen. Once you were late, we assumed you were dead." The smile on the man's face froze. "What do you mean by that?" It was unclear what the man with the cap had gone through. His expression was ugly when he arrived. Once he heard Jiang Cheng, he rolled up his sleeves. "Don't misunderstand." Jiang Cheng waved his hands and hid behind the woman with the ponytail. He looked scared. "I do not mean to insult you. I merely suspect you are not humans." The fuck, since the situation was spiraling, the woman with the ponytail had to step forward. Out of everyone's expectations, she chose to side with Jiang Cheng. She told the suited man and the man with the cap, "I believe his suspicion is not unfounded. You need to prove to us you are not ghosts." The suited man's face was dark, but he still suppressed his anger. "How do you want me to prove that?" The woman answered, "That is a problem you need to solve." They agreed to meet at the prop building. The woman NPC stressed this place, so this place must be important. Therefore, it would be extremely dangerous as well. The suited man and the man in the cap didn't want to take this risk, so they chose to show up after everyone else. Even Joe Taifu could see that. The way everyone looked at the suited man and his friend chilled. "I have an idea." Jiang Cheng jumped out from behind the woman with the ponytail. "We all know that ghosts are inexplicable presence in the missions. They are scary, creepy, and hungry for blood. They are amalgamations of everything that is negative." As he said that, he sidled closer to the suited man and his friend. This angered the man in the cap a lot. "What is your point?" He couldn't help but ask. Jiang Cheng licked his lips. "I mean, the biggest difference between humans and ghosts is that the latter has no emotions. They can't control themselves. In contrast, humans can control their actions and emotions at any time." He raised his head to look at the suited man with admiration. "I believe the real guardian angel will be able to do that." The sudden compliment made the suited man cautious of Jiang Cheng's intention. He frowned as he looked at Jiang Cheng, so, before he could finish, Jiang Cheng raised his right hand. He didn't have the time to react, and he felt a burning sensation on his left cheek. He couldn't believe what had happened. He was just slapped. Jiang Cheng dared to slap him, but, soon, he realized how wrong he was. Jiang Cheng dared to slap him more than once. His right cheek burned to pair with his left cheek. His two cheeks swelled at a visible speed. He touched his handsome face with his trembling fingers. He pounced at Jiang Cheng like crazy. He roared, "I'm going to kill you." Jiang Cheng immediately turned and ran. Fatty shouted at the others, who were stunned, "Run. The man in the suit is a ghost." He paused and then added, "He can't control himself anymore." This incident only ended after the man in the cap detained the suited man. The man in the cap whispered something in the other man's ear, and he gradually calmed down. He shot Jiang Cheng a fiery gaze and then ignored him. After that, the man in the cap explained on the two's behalf why they were late. They ran into the school's discipline teacher when they were looking for clues at the education building. The teacher chatted with him and told him to bring the equipment to the music classroom on the 4th floor of Building C. There was a rehearsal there. "Is there a specific time?" the woman in the ponytail asked. The man with the cap glanced at his wristwatch. "No, she told us to find you, and we should go there together." Just like that, the group was led by the man in the cap to Building C. Along the way, they traded information. However, just as Jiang Cheng predicted, there was nothing worth trading. Instead of information, it was more like they were exchanging their experience in the nightmare. Doctor, Fatty walked up to Jiang Cheng and whispered to him, "Don't you feel like this is similar to a media class?" He spat and continued, "I remember we would be served with extra homework to write down the lessons we'd learned after watching the movie." Jiang Cheng thought about it. "I do remember that. One time, our class teacher accidentally pulled from his own C drive and the wrong movie played. From then on, we had no more media classes." Fatty. By the way, Joe Taifu, who walked at the back, suddenly cut in, "What do you work as in real life? Why not be friends since we managed to meet here?" Fatty glanced at him and said unwillingly, "What do you do?" "I'm Joe Taifu. I'm a jewelry merchant." He pulled on his few wisps of hair to look more formal. "Some of you should have heard of me before." It was clear that the man was rich in real life. He was also very proud of his identity. Since Joe Taifu had started this topic, everyone played along. The man in the cap was called Luo Yi. It was an obvious fake name. He apparently ran a supermarket. The suited man was called Jin Jianren. He said he worked at a famous law firm. At his young age, he was already the vice president. After hearing the man's name, Fatty was stunned for a second. Jiang Cheng hummed. "Doctor," Fatty looked at Jiang Cheng. "Tell me honestly, did you think of something? What are you two talking about?" Jin Jianren wanted to smack Jiang Cheng and Fatty to death. "Nothing." Jiang Cheng quickly explained, "Brother Jianren, please don't misunderstand. We just thought your mother had given you the perfect name." The woman in the ponytail burst out laughing. She found Jiang Cheng to be very interesting. "What's your name?" The woman looked at Jiang Cheng and asked, "What do you do?" She might look normal, but she had a sharp presence. This was something not a normal woman could muster. "The name's Hao Shui." Jiang Cheng answered honestly, "You can refer to me by my name, or you can call me handsome. I'm a male model. I'm currently working at Butterfly KTV." "Fatty, a model?" The woman was more intrigued by Jiang Cheng. "The ones on magazines?" "No," Jiang Cheng said directly, "the ones who rely on their stamina and love from big sisters. Hao Shui, is it?" The woman nodded. "I'll remember you." "It's pointless remembering my name," Jiang Cheng said seriously. "You need to remember my call number. It's high class group, number 49. Then, it was the woman's turn. Her name was Su Wan, an international relations expert. She often spent her time overseas, and when she returned to the country last, she was yanked into a nightmare. This was her 4th mission. Soon, the girl in the pajamas' small voice came. Her name was Zhang Yining. She was a kindergarten teacher. She was still an intern. Finally, it was the man with the camera. He was the only newbie other than Joe Taifu. His appearance made him look honest and simple-minded. "Hello," he began, "my name is Long Tao. I'm currently a movie extra." Fatty was the last one. Just as Fatty was prepared to introduce himself, Jiang Cheng cut in, "His situation is rather special. He has no name because his eyes glazed over with sadness. He is an orphan." "Did he lose his parents when he was young?" Zhang Yining's face colored with pity. "You can call him Fatty," Jiang Cheng said. "I hear that's what people at his orphanage call him. Fatty." Soon, the group arrived at the education building. Occasionally, youthful girls walked out from the door. "This is the place," Jin Jianren announced. "Let's go in." The inner space was larger than Jiang Cheng thought. Classrooms lined both sides of the corridor. Singing and music came out of them. Even though there was an elevator, everyone collectively chose the stairs on the right. The large music classroom was at the end of the 4th floor corridor. When they got closer, a woman in high heels ran over to them. The woman was about 30 and had on light makeup. She asked directly, "Are you the media people?" After getting an affirmation, the woman sighed. After some exchanges, the woman explained that she was there on the discipline teacher's order to intercept the team of camera people. That day was the first day of rehearsal. Suwon thought about it and asked, "How many rehearsals will there be before the official event?" 3, the woman answered easily. "When will it start?" "We can start now." Then, the woman invited them into the classroom. It was called a classroom, but it looked more like a hall. Under the spotlight was the stage, and upon the stage were students in costumes. Occasionally, people hustled about to adjust the lighting and other stuff. It was clear that the school valued this anniversary. "Please." The woman went to talk to the person in charge of the venue and waved at the group of players, "You can set up here." The group fixed the camera. Long Tao chose the exact spot. After all, he was in the film industry. "We need 4 different recordings from this rehearsal," the woman explained politely. She adjusted her hair. "The first 3 recordings will be of the choirs from 3 classes, and the last recording will be of the combined choir of the 3 classes." "Okay," Jiang Cheng nodded. When he returned to his spot, Jiang Cheng took over the camera bag and took out the camera placed at the prop center. When Fatty saw this, he was confused. "Why did you take that out?" "This camera's lens was foggy. It could still be used, but the video would be heavily impacted." "I have nothing better to do anyway." Jiang Cheng took out the camera and aimed it at the stage. He adopted multiple angles and looked rather serious. Out of Fatty's expectations, when Jin Jianren and Suwon saw Jiang Cheng take out the camera, they both walked over. Jiang Cheng worked his shoulders and shook the camera at Jin Jianren. "Do you want to give it a try?" Jin Jianren backed off. However, he kept his attention on Jiang Cheng. The singing of the first class soon ended, and they got off the stage in order. The students from the second class took the stage. Since there was a tripod, Jiang Cheng didn't need to hold the camera constantly. He aimed the camera at the stage and steadied the students. They wore the same uniform of pure white blouses and navy blue skirts. There was a silk ribbon around their collar. The well-fitted dresses accentuated the young girls' waists. The pleated skirts lent them an academic air. Jiang Cheng's gaze swept over them. He would occasionally meet the girls' eyes. The difference was the girls would instantly look away, but Jiang Cheng would keep on gawking. As the second class got off the stage and no one was paying them any attention, Fatty came over to whisper, "Doctor, what are you doing?" Jiang Cheng pouted, "What do you mean? Are you insinuating I'm doing something bad?" "Fatty, doctor, I'm mighty impressed. You have the time to joke at a time like this," Jiang Cheng said without looking at him. "I don't think the NPC will ruin our equipment for no reason. Therefore, I suspect there is a problem with this." Fatty was shocked. "What kind of problem?" "I still don't know." He turned his head. "You don't need to worry about this camera. Focus on the other camera. Make sure nothing happens to it." Fatty nodded quickly, "Got it." Soon, the third class ended their performance. The final choir was about to say. At that moment, Long Tao, who was responsible for the camera, frowned. He held his stomach, and he started to sweat. Louis, who was beside him, was the first to discover this. "What's wrong?" "I have stomachache," Long Tao stammered with difficulty. "I probably ate something wrong in the morning." Zhou Taifu looked at the stage filled with people. There were staff milling about it, picking through different colored wires and stuff. It was for the final adjustment. "Can't you hold it in?" Zhou Taifu was rather annoyed. The hall gave him a bad feeling. Everyone there looked normal, but he felt weirdly affected. As for why, he couldn't pinpoint it. "We'll go back after we're done with the shooting." "I don't think that's possible." Long Tao's body trembled. Sweat dripped down his face. "It's too painful. This might be a relapse of my enteritis." There were no better options. In the end, it was Suwon who approached the woman who waited for them earlier. The woman looked awkward and then told them with some difficulty that the male toilet on that floor had been decommissioned, but if Long Tao didn't mind. Long Tao's face paled from the sudden pain. Clearly, he didn't mind. The woman led him to the bathroom. Su-wen had Zhou Taifu and Zhang Yining follow them. Even though Zhou Taifu didn't want to, he didn't dare to offend Su-wen. He had no choice. Zhang Yining looked as fearful as ever. Soon, the last choir began. The girls from the 3 classes walked around and found their spots on stage. Their singing was soft but penetrating. With the guidance of the maestro, the song slowly reached the chorus. The sound of heels clicking against the tiles echoed. The woman walked very fast. On the one hand, she was worried about Long Tao. On the other hand, she still needed to rush back to the rehearsal. After all, it was on her shoulders if something went wrong. After turning the corner, the woman paused and pointed down the corridor. "Keep on going, and you'll see the toilet. This place is rather secluded, so not many will come here." She turned around to look at Long Tao. "With your friend standing watch, you'll be fine." "Thank you. I still have things to do, so I can't stay." The woman turned around and left. She checked her phone as if she had something urgent to do. After the woman left, the atmosphere chilled. Zhou Taifu grumbled and urged Long Tao to hurry up. "I'm going." Long Tao just took 2 steps when he stopped and turned back to plead. "You have to wait for me. You can't leave on your own." Sure. Zhou Taifu waved his hands impatiently. Long Tao finally went ahead. The bathroom was further than he thought. It was at the end of the left corridor. Along the way, he passed many classrooms, but they had been abandoned for a long time, visible from the dust on the door handles. This made him uncomfortable. It was like he was a guest sent back in time. He suddenly became curious about this school's past. The more he thought about it, the more drawn into the history he was. Endless scenes were awakened in his mind. He walked blindly ahead. His footsteps echoed in the empty corridor like a man on a death march. He was finally there. Along the way, he was very alert. He was worried that a door would suddenly open and a demon would jump out. Even when he was standing before the toilet door, his heart was still racing. On the left was the girls' bathroom and his destination. He took a deep breath. "Is anyone there?" There was no answer. The place was deathly quiet. The moment he was about to step into the bathroom, his right eyelid twitched. He paused. This reminded him of a horror movie he watched many years ago. He forgot the movie title, but a scene stuck in his mind. The female main character was tricked into entering the bathroom. Then, she lost her lower body. She had her eyes gouged out by the ghost waiting in the bathroom because she couldn't escape. Based on his understanding, he was basically in a horror movie, and they were the chosen main characters. Therefore, he slowly backed away and turned to look behind him. It was the male bathroom. The male bathroom obviously had been abandoned for a long time already. The light blue iron door was left ajar. The paint was peeling in places to reveal the rust underneath. In comparison, the female toilet was much better preserved. The door was left wide open. The inside was decorated with white tiles. From what he stood, he could even see the clean sink. There was a bottle of hand sanitizer placed in the corner. The giant mirror reflected the gentle light. It was overly set up. This raised his caution. Without hesitation, Long Tao opened the iron door of the male bathroom. The creak of the axle was sharp, but he didn't care anymore. If anything, this meant that the place was safe in his mind. This was a trap. If he listened to the woman and entered the female bathroom, he'd be in danger. This confidence followed him as he finished his business. He lifted up his pants with satisfaction. However, before he exited the cubicle, he heard a strange sound. Dong dong dong. It was not loud and not close to him. Long Tao looked up at the yellowed ceiling. The sound seemed to come from above. He paid attention to it and realized the sound had a certain rhythm. The rhythm was strangely captivating. Long Tao tapped his feet along with it subconsciously. Drum beats? No Long Tao tried to place it. The sound was harder than a drum. However, he didn't know that many instruments to identify it. Dong dong dong. The rhythm picked up. Each beat landed on Long Tao's heart. He shivered uncontrollably. The rhythm became clearer and stronger until the last dong. This sound woke up Long Tao. Because this last beat was different from the others, it came from the opposite side. The female bathroom. Why would someone perform in the female bathroom? Could it be that thing? The rhythm began anew, and it soon paused outside the male bathroom. Long Tao's body froze because he realized something. Building C only had 4 floors, and he was on the top floor. So how could the sound have originated from above? The first cubicle door was pushed open. Long Tao closed his hand over his mouth. He didn't dare to make any sound. The bathroom was not that huge. It only had 5 cubicles. The cubicle was not tall. If one stood on tiptoe, one could easily look in. He was curling up inside the 4th cubicle. Dong dong. The second and third doors were pushed open. The strange sound paused outside his cubicle. Time froze at that moment. Long Tao made the decision to shove the door open and charge out. The cubicle next door suddenly opened. It was the innermost cubicle. The old axle creaked creepily. The thing skipped over the cubicle he was in. A few seconds later, the thudding sound resumed. The thing left the bathroom, and the strange sound faded away. It left. Long Tao's legs weakened, and he collapsed to the ground. The relief he felt was indescribable. Half a minute later, he forced himself to stand up. It had nothing to do with courage. He was worried that the thing might return. He leaned on the door and listened to his surroundings. Then, he slowly eased the door open. The bathroom was empty. Long Tao felt a burst of joy. He quickly slithered out of the cubicle and headed to the exit. He walked on his top toe so that he wouldn't make any sound. The exit came closer and closer. Just as he was about to step out of the bathroom, a sudden chill enveloped him, causing him to shiver. He had never experienced that before. Almost subconsciously, he turned around. His neck felt like it creaked like a rusted screw. There was nothing behind him. There was no ghost. As he sighed in relief and wanted to pull his gaze back, his eyes swept the mirror in front of the sink. He felt as if he was struck by thunder. The mirror in the male bathroom was covered in dust and cracks. However, these were not important to Long Tao. His pupils trembled. Through the reflection in the mirror, he saw a pair of legs floating above his head. A wind picked up in the enclosed space, and the legs swayed. Long Tao shook. He lifted his head slowly. He saw a pair of red and venomous eyes. The eyes were hidden in a thick curtain of black hair. They were like pairs of knives. Long Tao opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His mouth continued to widen until it was much bigger than humanly possible. The corners of his lips tore, and blood spurted out. With a last crack, everything returned to silence. A drop of blood dripped into the wide-open eyes of the dead. What is taking him so long? Zhou Taifu looked down the corridor and grumbled. After a while, Zhang Yining added, "His stomachache is probably very bad." Then, she said as if to herself, "But he has indeed taken a bit too long." This gave Zhou Taifu a bad feeling. He extinguished the cigarette between his fingers. He frowned and suddenly felt the corridors around him become eerier. How long has he been gone? I don't know. Zhang Yining sounded so fragile, it has to have been at least 20 minutes. Zhou Taifu's face darkened. He ran towards the music classroom. Zhang Yining appeared to be frightened by Zhou Taifu. She asked in a hurry, "Mr. Zhou, where are you going?" "I'm going to get reinforcements," Zhou Taifu said without turning his head. "You wait there." "I don't dare to." Zhang Yining also knew things were not right. She quickly followed Zhou Taifu. The two walked faster until they ran. It was like the one who was last would be caught by the ghost. The rehearsal just ended. Jiang Cheng and the rest were packing up the stuff. Joe Taifu was used to an easy life, so he was already exhausted from a short run. In the end, it was Jiang Yining who told everyone everything. "Neither of you went to check on him before you came back?" Louis asked. After all, no one expected the ghosts to appear in the day. Plus, there were so many people there. "Don't panic," Jiang Cheng stood forward. "We still don't know anything." Even though that was what he said, he also thought things were not looking good for Long Tao. "Do you know the bathroom's location?" Su Wen asked. "Yes." Joe Taifu glanced at the stage, and he asked weakly, "Should we bring that woman?" He was talking about the woman who welcomed them at this building. In other words, Joe Taifu wanted to sacrifice this woman. Suppose Long Tao were fine, then great. If something happened to him, the woman would be the one to die first. Jin Jinren, who had not said anything until then, scoffed, "I'd advise against that. Don't find trouble in this world." Jiang Cheng and Su Wen agreed with him on this matter. They silently moved towards the exit. To their surprise, the woman they were talking about came over and asked directly, "Where is your friend?" Everyone was silent. The woman's face changed as she became more nervous. Her hair was wet with sweat, and it stuck to her face. Did something happen to him? Hearing this, Su Wen's expression changed. Just as she was about to say something, Jiang Cheng cut in, "It's fine." His body was too weak from the stomachache, so he went back to resting first. Oh, the woman's face became ready again. A team of students walked over. One of them wore round-rimmed glasses. The girl's sharp gaze wandered everywhere before landing on the woman. "Teacher phone?" The woman responded. She told Jiang Cheng's group that she still had something to do, so she had to leave for now. Jiang Cheng nodded. "Okay, we can return on our own." "When is the next rehearsal?" The question seemed to stump the woman. She thought about it before saying, "We need the superiors to decide on that first." After she left, the group headed to the bathroom where Long Tao was. Their faces paled. Even Joe Taifu and Jiang Yining, who had been there, felt that something was wrong. The corridor was too deep and quiet, like it had no ending. They didn't feel that way when the lady was leading them, but this looked like the typical start of a horror flick. When they turned the last corner, the group reached the end of the corridor. The left was the female bathroom, and the right. Jiang Cheng saw the rusted, half-ajar door, and a curious expression crossed his brows. "Here." Su Wen raised her chin to point at the male bathroom. "Go in and check." No one questioned her because everyone smelled the scent of blood. The closer they got to the door, the stronger the scent. In the end, it was Luo Yi who pushed the door open further. The moment he did that, he jumped back. The bathroom was very dim. None of them entered the bathroom instantly, but waited to get used to the dark environment. Slowly, the scene inside the room clarified. Joe Taifu, who was forced to the front, slid down to the floor. Jiang Yining's lips paled from fright. Her teeth kept trembling, and she couldn't say anything. Long Tao was standing before them with his head slightly raised. His body was frozen, and he looked like he had just been hauled out of a blood pool. Like the woman in the qipao, his chin was gone. The exposed gum was ugly and glaring. The broken teeth were chipped in the flesh. They were like maggots wiggling. Fatty felt like the content of his stomach churning around. There was spray-patterned blood everywhere. Blood was on the mirror, sink, and even the moldy ceiling. Clearly, the murder happened in an instant. Long Tao's chip was snapped off. The trace of tearing was visible. One could even see the esophagus and other broken fragments. Su Wen was the first to walk forward. Jiang Cheng followed her. The two were very careful to pick where to put their feet. The sound of the shoes against the pool of blood was slippery and eerie. The corpse's arms dangled weakly. Jiang Cheng examined the body and realized the victim's arm muscles were very tense. There was no sign of struggle, and the scene was well preserved. "Doctor," Fatty said stutteringly, "look at his eyes." The corpse's eyes were round, and the brows were raised at an exaggerated angle. The victim must have seen something extremely scary before he died. Even after death, his face displayed an indescribable terror. His tongue is missing too. Suwon pulled back her hand and announced in a calm voice. One couldn't help but wonder if this was a result of her interacting with dead bodies often. It was normal to die in a nightmare. What they needed to do was to figure out the cause of death and the taboo behind it. Jo Taifu, who looked better, said in a hurry, Why is he in the male bathroom? He should be in the female bathroom." "That's right," Zhang Yining added weakly. "I remember the lady asking him to use the female bathroom." Louis scratched his chin and said, "Could it be that Long Tao found something dangerous in the female bathroom, so he went to use the male bathroom?" "No." Jiang Cheng looked around. "Long Tao never even entered the female bathroom." "What's your evidence?" Jiang Cheng glanced at the person lightly and shrugged. "If he really discovered something in the female bathroom, do you think he would be given the chance to escape the female bathroom and enter the male bathroom? Perhaps the ghost purposely chased him from the female bathroom to the male bathroom." Jin Jianren smiled snidely. "No one can tell." Jiang Cheng's attitude annoyed him. Jiang Cheng shrugged again. "If our guardian angel insists on that, I won't argue with it. I also think Mr. Hao has a point." Suwon thought about it and continued, "Now, we need to confirm this ghost's identity and figure out its story." Jo Taifu was visibly shaken. "Are you kidding? Why are we looking for the ghost? Can't we just hide? The mission will end in 7 days. Louis licked his lips and chuckled. "The nightmare always has some naive people. This is very troubling because naivete can't hide stupidity." Jo Taifu was angry. "What do you mean?" "Mr. Jo Taifu," Louis turned his cap to the side to reveal the knife wound on his forehead. This changed his presence fully. "Are you sure you can leave this place safely after 7 days? Jo Taifu looked at the man who had shed his disguise. The evilness in his eyes was not an act at that moment. Jiang Cheng knelt down and observed the corner of the bathroom. Hearing that, the group walked over. They followed Jiang Cheng's gaze and noticed an irregular imprint on the ground. It was hard to discover if one wasn't paying very close attention. "What is this?" Fatty asked. The imprints were near Long Tao's body. They looked like they were left behind by some kind of animal. Suwon touched the prints. They were still fresh. They were easy to differentiate from the old stains on the ground. They looked like hoof prints, Suwon concluded after a few more observations. Probably a goat or a ram. Fatty widened his eyes. "Are you saying a goat tore off his chin?" This was too preposterous. Suwon ignored him. She lowered her head to follow the direction of the prints. She realized that the thing that left behind the prints took some time walking around the bathroom. The group pushed open the cubicle doors and found some feces in the 4th cubicle. They were fresh. They should belong to Long Tao. He was killed after he just pooped and wanted to leave the cubicle. Fatty shivered. This was a clear conclusion. Even though they were prepared, the group became solemn after the second victim appeared. There were 2 reasons behind this. One was the strange deaths of the woman in the Qipao and Long Tao. 2 was that mysterious ram. "His jaw is gone," Luo Yi observed. His expression was curious, as if he were confused. Moments later, he added, "Just like the woman who died earlier. They failed to locate the woman's jaw at the crime scene." Jo Taifu shivered as if he was reminded of something scary. He said with shivering lips, it's the ghost who took their jaws." It was an obvious thing to say, but it still made the atmosphere darker. Jiang Cheng stood beside the corpse. He was deep in thought. Xianwen noticed him and walked over to ask, "What are you thinking about?" Jiang Cheng shrugged as he finished his reverie. He stared at the body and then said, "Pay attention to his eyes." Long Tao's eyes were almost popping out of their sockets. His pupils widened. His eyes were red with blood and thick with fear. He looked up with exaggeration. His death was horrifying, but this time, someone noticed something else. At the same time, Su-won and Jiang Cheng picked up something. They lifted their heads to look at the ceiling. The ceiling was empty. The spot where the light bulb should be was empty but for a bunch of wires as well as a pool of mysterious, yellow stain. Su-won adjusted her breathing and pulled her gaze back. This was not unfamiliar. It was the same as when they found the woman in the Qipao. Before they died, the last thing they did was look up. They couldn't understand and resist the existence that appeared above them. They had been in this world for less than 24 hours. Of the 9 people, only 7 remained. 2 people had died, but the group still had no idea how they died. The strange ram hoof prints were not actual evidence. The atmosphere was oppressive as they headed back. Fatty wanted to say something but was shut down by Jiang Cheng by his gaze. When they returned to their room, the first thing Fatty did once the door closed was to rush to Jiang Cheng's side. "Doctor, the ghost here can kill people in the day. This is too scary." Jiang Cheng sat on his bed and nodded. "It looks like the ghost in this mission is different from the last mission. They operate differently." Fatty licked his lips and looked up. When he realized everything was fine, he continued, "Do you think the ghost came from the ceiling?" Jiang Cheng looked at the door. "No clue, but at least the warning bell has been rung with 2 people dead. The danger might come from above us." Fatty wrapped his arms around him as he tried to stay calm. "Then, what should we do now?" "Wait." Fatty was stunned. "Wait for?" Jiang Cheng turned to Fatty. There were things Fatty couldn't understand in his eyes. Finally, he answered, "For the next person to die." "What?" Jiang Cheng ignored him and lay down on the bed. He pulled the blanket to his chin and closed his eyes. "I'm tired. Don't wake me before 5. Room 406. After Long Tao died, Zhang Yining took his spot. The girl refused to return to room 407. She didn't even mind sleeping on the ground. She curled up in the corner. Perhaps it was cold or fear. Her body kept shaking. The chair she leaned against creaked noisily. Zhou Taifu dominated a whole bed. His eyes kept looking around. He kept looking at the door and the ceiling. He was very nervous. "Big sister," Zhang Yining's voice shook from terror. She looked at Su-won carefully. "Aren't you scared?" Su-won looked over the video recorded in the camera. She heard the girl and answered casually, "I am." Seeing how calm Big Sister is, I thought Big Sister is not afraid of those things. As if influenced by Su-won, Zhang Yining slowly calmed down and she stopped shaking. There was a light of hope in her eyes. Su-won glanced at Zhang Yining and smiled. "Little sister, ghosts aren't as scary as you think. They represent the purest evil, but they are logical. Unlike..." Zhang Yining asked in curiosity, "Unlike what?" "Unlike some people who are so good at disguise that they kill without warning." At this point, Su-won's gaze shifted. It shone like a moon in the dark. She stared at Zhang Yining and continued, "Therefore, I'm more scared of humans than ghosts." Room 405. The man who called himself Lu Yi dropped his cap on the table. He paced around the room anxiously. "Stop it." Sitting on the chair, Zhen Jianren rubbed his temple. "You're making me dizzy." The words pricked Luo Yi. He stopped and said agitatedly, "Haven't you discovered it? The mission this time is very strange. This is only the 2nd day, but the ghost has already started killing during the day." "Indeed." Zhen Jianren nodded. "This is the unavoidable truth. It's cruel but real." "I'm not asking for agreement." Zhen Jianren sighed. "Okay, I know what you want. After this mission is over, I promise I'll complete your favor." He smiled, "And you can live under the sun again." Hearing this, Luo Yi's face brightened. He sat down before Zhen Jianren and sighed. "Tell me, you're clever. You should have seen something." Zhen Jianren massaged his neck. Compared to Luo Yi, he was there for a holiday. "The thing is with Su-won. I knew this was within Luo Yi's prediction. But he still asked, how can you be sure it is not with the 2 from room 404? They are very suspicious." Zhen Jianren shook his head. "It won't be them. Hao Shui is too high profile. Someone with the thing will not do something this stupid. Can't he be acting? Luo Yi frowned. Do not question me. Jin Jianren raised one finger and revealed a confident smile. You should know that no one is able to trick me. He paused and suddenly realized Luo Yi was looking at him strangely. At the same time, a burning sensation came from his face. He was reminded of something. He's just an idiot, he hissed, a giant idiot. At 5 sharp, Fatty walked over to tap Jiang Cheng lightly on his shoulder. Doctor, it's about time to wake up. Jiang Cheng rubbed his eyes and sat up. He was very tired, so he slept soundly. Did something happen? He stretched as he asked. The people from room 406 came to look for you, Fatty said. Jiang Cheng turned around as his gaze sharpened. Why didn't you wake me up? And how could you open? Fatty could guess what he was about to say, so he quickly explained, Don't worry, doctor. I've tested them. They are fine. Tested them? Jiang Cheng felt his head getting heavier. That's right, doctor. Fatty said confidently. I also suspected his identity, so I asked him to bark 3 times like a dog to test him. After he paused, he continued, Doctor, you knew how scary the ghosts are. Therefore, I believe the ghosts would disdain doing something like that. Jiang Cheng frowned. And then, Fatty shrugged. He did bark, but it sounded very unwilling. And it was not that accurate. Taking a deep breath, Jiang Cheng changed the topic. What did he say after he came in? Doctor, you misunderstand. I didn't let him in. Fatty suddenly became serious. He leaned over to whisper, because I was scared this could be a shameless ghost. Jiang Cheng gave Fatty a side eye before tooting at the end. Doctor, Fatty looked at the door and asked in fear. Do you think it was a ghost? Jiang Cheng shook his head. No. Fatty groused. You were asleep, so how could you know? Fatty. Jiang Cheng stood up to pat his shoulder. If I were you, I'd start praying that it wasn't a ghost. Doctor, please don't say that. You made me scared. Fatty swallowed and whispered back. Jiang Cheng thought about it and said seriously, Don't worry, as long as I'm here. Fatty raised his head expectantly. Jiang Cheng resumed, I'll make sure to bring your ashes out with me. Before the sky darkened, Jiang Cheng left and headed to room 406. The corridor was silent. The ends of the corridor were drawn out by the setting sun. A rotting smell lingered in the air. Fatty followed him carefully. He wished he could get stuck to Jiang Cheng. When he passed by room 405, Jiang Cheng paused. Fatty clearly panicked, but he still controlled his volume as he asked, What's wrong? Nothing. Jiang Cheng replied swiftly and continued to room 406. However, before he could knock, the door opened. A face wearing a cap appeared before him. The rim of the cap was pressed very low, hiding a pair of murky eyes. It was Luo Yi from room 405. Jiang Cheng looked into the room. Every breathing person was there. Suwon glanced at Jiang Cheng and commented, You were the last one to arrive. She sat beside the bed, her body straight as an arrow. Jin Jianren leaned back in his chair. When he saw Jiang Cheng, his face turned up with a scowl, but he said nothing. Miss Su. Jiang Cheng looked at Suwon and said calmly, I heard you were looking for me. Earlier, I had him go find you, but your friend didn't open the door. Suwon then glanced at Zhou Taifu, who curled up on the bed. The meaning was clear. The simple conversation got Fatty excited. His eyes glowed and complimented Zhou Taifu, Brother, you were so good at mimicking a dog's bark. Zhou Taifu's face darkened immediately. After all, he was a rich man in real life, and he had his pride. However, he understood his current situation. Therefore, other than his ugly expression, he didn't say anything. Enough. Suwon cut off Fatty and moved her eyes back to Jiang Cheng. She looked at the black camera bag he was carrying. Let me check the camera. Jiang Cheng handed the camera over. I've examined it. There's nothing unique about it. Suwon accepted the camera and studied it closely. Jin Jianren shot Luo Yi a look. Jin Jianren walked to Su Wen's side to observe the recordings. Luo Yi turned around and kept an eye on Jiang Cheng. At the same time, Jiang Cheng grabbed the other camera in room 406 and looked through the videos. It was the camera lent to them by the elder at the prop building. Fatty leaned over and hid behind Jiang Cheng. He narrowed his eyes. He did this because if there was something scary, he could close his eyes instantly. The 4 videos were quite short. It was a rehearsal, so a lot of steps were skipped. This meant that all the videos added up to just slightly more than 20 minutes of footage. After watching the video, Su Wen put down the camera, and her expression was calm. As Jiang Cheng said, there was no valuable clue. Other than the angle, the videos taken by the 2 cameras were the same. Was her hypothesis wrong from the start? She couldn't help but question herself. However, based on her experience, it would make sense for there to be a lack of clues in the 2 cameras given by the NPC. She even suspected that Long Tao's death had to do with him being the cameraman. After all, in the missions before this, there had been no example of the ghost killing the players in the day on the second day. This was very abnormal. She got no results. She took a deep breath and glanced at Jiang Cheng subconsciously. To her surprise, Jiang Cheng was looking at the recording with a strange expression. In her mind, she had never seen this expression on the man before. "Mr. Hao," Su Wen began. Jiang Cheng ignored her as his focus was fully trained on the camera. His right finger pressed the buttons occasionally. With a reminder from Su Wen, everyone noticed how strange Jiang Cheng was acting. Everyone surrounded him and realized Jiang Cheng was repeating the same part of the video. Zhou Taifu was very confused. He had to ask, "What are you doing?" Jiang Cheng ignored him too. He raised his head and looked into Su Wen's eyes. The latter was stunned by the sharpness of his gaze. "How many people are in the first choir?" Almost subconsciously, Su Wen rewinded the tape she had and soon answered, 16. "What about the second choir?" 15. "The third?" 17. Then, Jiang Cheng slowly raised the camera he was holding. The video was paused at the moment when all the choir groups were on stage, singing together. Su Wen stared at the screen. She saw the girls' uniforms and their long hair. The next second, her pupils trembled as something registered in her mind. There were 49 girls on stage. Who is the extra person? Louis noticed the problem. However, Zhang Yining reacted faster than he did. She grabbed the other camera half a second later. "No." She put down the camera as her face paled. The words she said were unsettling. "There are only 48 girls in this video." Zhou Taifu, with a shivering body, stared at the camera Jiang Cheng was holding. His pitch rose involuntarily. "You mean one of the cameras captured the ghost?" No one answered. This was undeniable. The only thing that helped when he said the truth out loud was to ease his anxiety. Things were not different from what they predicted. The 2 cameras had something more about them. Namely, the camera given by the NPC could capture things that the naked eye couldn't see. No one said anything. The atmosphere was scarily oppressive. "All right." Louis stood forward. He shared a look with Zheng Jianren. When the latter didn't stop him, he continued, "Don't need to be so pessimistic. At least we've found the ghost in the mission." He paused before adding, "Now it's time to confirm the ghost's identity." Su Wen continued, "How do you plan to do that?" "We'll compare the 2 videos and pinpoint the additional person." That's the ghost. Louis was confused as he looked at Su Wen. After all, Su Wen was not a newbie. Why would she ask a question like that? Jiang Cheng handed the camera over to Luo Yi. "Then, go ahead." Even though he was confused, Luo Yi accepted the camera and started to find out who the extra person was. After some time, Luo Yi frowned as he noticed something. Fatty asked him what was wrong. He didn't answer and turned to grab the other camera from Zhang Yining. The other camera was normal, but the video was blurry because the lens was foggy. How is this possible? Su Wen glanced at Luo Yi. She was as peaceful as Jiang Cheng. He paused both videos at the last choir segment to see who the extra one was. However, he failed. Luo Yi's eyes burned as he compared the girls one by one from the first row to the last, from the left to the right. However, no one was missing. The result was that everyone who had appeared in the first camera showed up in the second camera. There was no one extra. However, this was impossible. There were 49 people in the first video and 48 in the second. Jiang Cheng had already noticed this when he saw the strangeness in numbers. He assumed this was caused by the limitations in the mission. Enough. Jin Jinren stopped Luo Yi. The latter's mental state was getting unstable. There might be other dangers hidden in the videos. After the cameras were removed from him, Luo Yi's state rapidly lowered as if he were being drained. After sending Luo Yi to bed to rest, Jin Jinren gritted his teeth at Su-won. What should we do now? After all, he determined the thing was with Su-won. Mr. Hao. Su-won turned to Jiang Cheng. What do you think? Jiang Cheng thought about it and answered, since the ghost has appeared in this method, I believe she should be a student here and has been a part of the choir. He paused. Well, she was part of the choir. She had deep resentment after she died, so she came back to the rehearsal and repeated her experience. Zhang Yining frowned and said. Jiang Cheng glanced at her. He felt like she had already changed from before. Perhaps hatred is more appropriate than resentment. Do you remember what the woman who led us to the rehearsal said? Su-won raised her head to say, she knew something was wrong when Long Tao was in the toilet for a little longer. Fatty nodded vehemently. That's right. I was so scared. So she must know something. Zhou Taifu scratched his chin. We can start with her. When we see her next, we can test her to figure out what is happening. The man appeared to have changed. He could follow along with everyone's thoughts and propose his explanation. After that, things became simpler. Based on the known clues, everyone came up with a simple plot for this mission. The ghost was a student at this school, female, died due to uncertain reasons. It had to be something bad, or she wouldn't become a ghost. Compared to simple murder, this was more like a premeditated revenge. Su-won even suggested that the girl might have been raped, killed, and then dismembered. Interestingly enough, the school was predominantly female. Even the security force was female. This was very abnormal. However, if the school started to change their hiring policy after a rape and murder incident had happened at school, everything made sense. Therefore, our job should be to identify the girl. Jiang Cheng sat on the chair and looked very professional. Now, I will assign everyone their task. First, he stressed, one team should go investigate the 4 teams of the choir. Then, another team should mix with the students to see if there's another rumor among the student body. He paused. If Su-won were right, the school would definitely cover up the incident. However, the stories would definitely spread among the students. He took a deep breath and looked around. Then, it's the prop building. After all, this camera that captured the ghost came from there. Therefore, we need a team to return there. At this point, everyone's face dimmed. They could accept the first 2 tasks, but this one. Once they thought of the old man's pale face, they felt uncomfortable. I agree with your arrangement. Su-won's expression brightened. She looked into Jiang Cheng's eyes. Moments later, her lips moved, but she didn't say anything. Instead, it was Jin Jinren who scoffed, you're cunning. As you set up the tasks, you send other people to the prop building. Someone else agreed, that's right. The prop building is the most dangerous. You can go. I won't go. As if worried about being voted out, Zhou Taifu raised his voice. I'm fine with either of the first 2 tasks, but not the last one. I'm not going either. Luo Yi leaned on the bed. His face had more colors. He was with Jin Jinren, so naturally, they stood on the same side. Fatty looked at Jiang Cheng worriedly. The situation was not good for him, but... You misunderstand. Jiang Cheng said evenly, no one is forcing you to go to the prop building. If none of you want to go, I'll go. Fatty shivered when he heard that. He looked at Jiang Cheng. He even thought that he was imagining things. However, Jiang Cheng didn't look like he was joking. He sat up straight, and his eyes were serene. He was fearless, reliable, and stable. He stood out from the other calculating members. No one expected Jiang Cheng to take on this task himself. Jin Jianren shared a swift look with Luo Yi. They both showed incredulity. They couldn't guess what Jiang Cheng was planning. Now, it's your turn. Jiang Cheng resumed. Who will find the woman from the rehearsal? He turned to the other side. Who will find the students? Moments later. I'll find the woman. Su Wen suddenly spoke. The way she looked at Jiang Cheng changed. I know where we can find her. Plus, I can communicate with her easier than the others. Jiang Cheng nodded. Okay. Zhang Yining and Zhou Taifu were happy to follow her. Zhou Taifu even stood up to stand behind Su Wen. Since Jiang Cheng shouldered the task of going to the prop building, Jin Jianren's expression became strange. He couldn't help but suspect the situation. However, everyone's attention was pulled away from Jiang Cheng and shifted to him. He could only grumble. Then, we'll interact with the students. Perfect. Jiang Cheng stood. Then, it's decided. We'll split up tomorrow. They didn't waste time on warnings like stay safe. As the sky darkened, they returned to their rooms. Doctor, Fatty rushed over as the door closed. What are you doing? The prop building is clearly the most dangerous. He asked, why did you volunteer? He couldn't understand Jiang Cheng at all. Jiang Cheng casually opened the mineral water, took a small sip, tore open the chocolate bar, and munched on it. After doing all that, he told Fatty leisurely, there are dangers with meeting the woman and the students as well. Fatty widened his eyes. Are they the same? Don't worry. Jiang Cheng sat on the bed and chewed on the chocolate. Then, he added, if you think it's too dangerous, you can join Su Wen's team. Fatty suddenly stood up. His brows scrunched together, and his face was red. Jiang Cheng only then realized how large Fatty was. He blocked all the light from coming through. What kind of person do you think I am? Fatty huffed like he had been humiliated. As long as Doctor is still alive, I'll not leave you. Jiang Cheng stopped munching. Room 405. Jin Jianren's face was dark. Luo Yi didn't look much better. One stood, and one sat. Luo Yi looked worried. Luo Yi bit his lips and suddenly stood up. He dumped the cigarette on the ground and said coldly, what is that Hao Shui planning? Why would he volunteer to go to the prop building? Luo Yi couldn't get it. Even an idiot will know that place is dangerous. Half a second later, Jin Jianren responded. His nervousness disappeared. He returned to how he originally was. He was exquisite, flawless, and kind. He must have his reason. What reason? Do you still remember what the woman said during the rehearsal? Jin Jianren said without looking at Luo Yi. She said the principal wanted to check the recordings and confirm the next rehearsal time. Luo Yi didn't understand why the man brought this up. He barely remembered this. If Jin Jianren didn't bring it up, he would have forgotten about it. What is? Jin Jianren glanced out the window, but no one came until now. Luo Yi suddenly grasped the meaning. If the school valued the event so much, they should have sent someone to claim the cameras already. And that principle mentioned by the woman. Therefore the whole thing is a lie. Luo Yi gasped. The real purpose is for us to focus on the videos because only we can see the videos. Jin Jianren tossed away the cigarette butt. He waved his other hand to disperse the smoke before him. His nails were manicured. They reflected the warm light. Despite his appearance, he was the one who was the decision maker in this room. He stared at the dark green iron cupboard before him. He extended his left hand and slowly pulled the drawer out before pushing it back in. There was nothing inside it. He knew this very well, and he was not surprised. He repeated this action mechanically. Accompanying the motion was the grating sound of friction. Luo Yi hated this. However, he said nothing and merely frowned. He knew this was the man's habit. Most people would do a lot of repetitive and meaningless actions when they used their brains. Some writers would scratch their heads. Jiang Jinren's habit was to open and close something, like a drawer, repeatedly. This might have to do with his past experience. However, Luo Yi was not interested in that. Finally, the annoying sound stopped. Luo Yi looked at Jiang Jinren seriously. This meant that the latter had come to a conclusion. There are two possibilities. Jiang Jinren focused his eyes. The people in room 404 have found clues that we haven't. This clue is very important, and they are willing to risk their lives for it. Luo Yi thought about it. Then, what is the second one? The people in room 404 have reached some kind of agreement with the woman from room 406. Jiang Jinren glanced at his roommate. They have started to work together, and they were acting earlier. Luo Yi's pupils trembled.